Lord, a mighty hand of praise this morning. This is the day that the Lord has made. I told some folks earlier, I said, this is the day that the Lord has made. Scripture says, I will rejoice and be glad in it. You know what? If God could go through all the effort to make the day, we got the easy part. All we got to do is be happy about it. He already did all the heavy lifting for you. How about that? It's good to be in the house of the Lord this morning. It's good to see you. Welcome to all our family. Welcome to all our first-time guests. We're excited. We're in the middle, or really just the beginning, I should say, of our growth campaign, UNstuck. And I believe a lot of us want to see God do some wonderful things, not only for us, but also in us. We talked a little bit over, well, let me go back and say this UNstuck campaign is across the entire congregation, really from the womb to the tomb. Our nursery is doing Disciple Land. Our Kids Zone is doing Royal E. Loud is doing Define 24/7, and we are doing UNstuck. The entire church is on the same page, hearing it in ways that make a difference for us and our age group. Last week and the week before, we started kind of dealing with this idea of mindsets and what a mindset is. And a mindset is an opinion, it's a belief, and it's a thought. And we talked about mindsets matter because a mindset can be, we found out on our kickoff, a mindset can be blinding, right? And a mindset can be binding. So this week we want to look a little bit more about the kinds of mindsets or the kinds of attitudes that God blesses. How do you know that God doesn't just bless any old attitude? Oh, I'm going to say that again. Say it again, preacher. I'm going to say it again. How many know that God just don't bless any, I'm going to use all kind of broken English this morning. God don't bless any old kind of attitude. You don't just give God an attitude and say, here, bless this attitude. But there are attitudes that God blesses, and when he blesses those attitudes, guess what they bring into our lives? Blessings. Did you catch that? Now, the only thing that could break a curse is what? Oh, I wish I had a church that was awoke. I'm going to have to get y'all. Y'all need to sing another stanza of He Reigns Forever? Y'all ready? Okay. The only thing that'll break a curse is what? Okay, y'all are ready. I think y'all ain't ready. The only thing that'll break a curse is a what? Why y'all answering now? Y'all ain't answering. Lord Jesus. I'm going to ask everybody. The only thing that'll break a curse is a what? A blessing, absolutely. As a matter of fact, our memory verse this week, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Did you know that the Old Testament ended with a curse? In Jesus' first sermon, this is the introduction. His first sermon says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus says, you know what, when you want the curse to end, you got to pronounce a blessing. That was free. You ready, Murphy? I'll take that as a yes. I was in England some years ago. I can't remember what years it was actually, which trip this was, but I do remember this. I was on what I would call their equivalent of a Greyhound bus. I was in London speaking and for services and then doing some leadership development. And then I was going to Birmingham, which is, I guess it's the second largest city in England, but it's across England, several hours away. And so I had to take the train, the subway, all the way down, I forget what they call it now, but whatever, the tube. Had to take the tube, which is their subway, and go all the way down to downtown London, then switch, and then take another tube to get to the bus station, to get on a bus, to go all the way up, I guess it was towards the north, to Birmingham. Was there for a few days. Everything went fine. Got back on the bus, headed back down to London, and realized I had to go to the bathroom. I had to urinate. I'm just telling y'all. Yeah. No, I wanted y'all to know it was number one. But anyway, so I went to go to the restroom, and okay, so it would be confusion, and the restroom was out of order. That's what I said. Oh my, because this was a long bus ride. So it was long, and it seemed longer coming back home because I had to go to the restroom. So anyway, we finally get to the station. I'm like, if I don't hurry up and find this restroom, there's going to be a problem. So I'm trying to run into this. I'm like, where is this restroom at? So I run in, where is the restroom? And they don't call it a restroom or bathroom, they call it the toilet. So I said, where the toilet? They said, oh, it's down there, da-da-da-da. So I'm running, and the worst thing that could possibly happens. Well, the second worst thing. I get to the bathroom, and what do you think I discover? Yeah, those are all bad too. Okay, so maybe it's the fourth worst thing that could have happened. So, that would have been. So I get to the restroom, and it has a turnstile there, like you would see at a subway station, which means you have to put money in. See, y'all thought you heard all my stories. You ain't heard this one before. And so I'm like, okay. And I really, at this point, the closer you get, the worse it gets. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So like the closer you get to the toilet, the worse, yeah. So I'm like, okay, I'm going through my pocket. I know their money, their pounds, their dollars, and all that. I have that on me. But it requires coins, which I don't know the difference between one coin from another. So I'm like, good God. I'm like, okay, I forgot how much it costs. So I'm sitting there taking every coin I got. I'm just putting it in. I'm like, help me, Jesus. I'm just putting it in. Meanwhile, as I'm putting it in, all the brothers are just walking right by me, dropping, and I'm sitting there like, God, no. I was like, this is going to end one of two ways. Either way, it's not good. Either I'm going to be soiled going all the rest of the way home, and I had 2 more hours to go, or I'm going to be arrested for jumping a turnstile. Because they got nothing but cameras over in England. If you've ever been, you're on camera, average person's on camera, 17 different cameras at any given point. True story. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh God. So what do y'all think I did? Jump the turnstile. Don't judge me. Yeah, I jumped the turnstile. No, that was Brooklyn. So I get in, whatever, and I'm like, all right, no one ever comes, the police, whatever, there's no fine, whatever. And I thought about that as I was preparing for this because I've been in more than one situation. I've been in front of a bridge in New York when we couldn't get back home because I don't know what happened, but then we got in the wrong spot and didn't have enough money. So I've been in places when I didn't have enough. Have you ever been in a place when you didn't have it? And I thought, what could be worse than being in a place or a situation, as I like to call that last story, a situation where you don't have enough. The only thing worse than being in a situation where you don't have enough is being in a situation where you don't think you're enough. And a lot of people battle with that privately and don't actually address it. When we go through these situations and circumstances in our lives where we show up, and when we get to whatever that place is, we find out in somehow or some case that there's a deeper feeling inside that God, I'm just not enough. I tried this. I got this job, but I'm not enough. I'm in this relationship, but I'm not enough. And we find ourselves feeling this sense of not being enough. And it kind of gives you sort of two options that I have observed. These are the main two options that I have observed, that how people respond when they think they're not enough. The first option is they just kind of stew. They stew. People who don't think that they're enough, don't think they have what it takes, feel a sense of inadequacy, can stew. In other words, they can stew stuck on the sidelines of life, just kind of on the side of the highway, on the side of the dance floor, just on the wall, just on the side, because I would dance, but I don't think I have what it takes. I would get on the highway, but I don't think I have what it takes. I would fly, but I don't think I have, so I'm going to stew stuck on the side, kind of stewing about what I'm not, what I don't have, why I'm not good enough, why it wouldn't work out for me if I did try it, why I shouldn't take a risk, how I might fail, how if I did succeed I still could fail, and they'll kind of just stew on the sidelines. That's your first person. Your second person is going to be stuck a different way. They're not stuck stewing on the sidelines. They're stuck doing, watch this, proving to everybody else that they are significant, that they are worthy, and that they are enough. So you can spend your whole life, watch this, proving to other people that you are enough. You can go to get degrees that you don't need. You can buy stuff, buy people gifts with money that you don't have, that you don't even like, just to prove to them that you are enough. Folks will spend, or probably spent last Friday online, proving to their ex that, you missed a good thing. I really am enough. Taking enough photos, putting it on Instagram, putting it on Facebook, putting it on social media, spending your time proving to everybody else that underneath all this, I am enough. And the truth is, you're not really trying to prove it to them. You're probably trying to prove it to you. So I want to take a quick survey. Put the survey up for me, please. You got the survey? Say yes or no. Yes. No. Yes. No. Yes. Well, say something. I'm going to take a no. Okay, so I got it. It's all good. I'm ready. So if you are a steward, that means that when you don't feel adequate or you don't feel like you have enough, that you might kind of like sit on the sidelines, you self-analyze, self-critique, you won't take a risk, you kind of sit and you stew. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. Thank you. There we go. If you are a doer, you're moving, yet you're stuck proving that you are enough underneath it, I want you to raise your hand for B. So everybody think about which one on a typical day. May not be right now, may not be the situation you're in right now, but if one of those was you, what would you find yourself, let me read the question. When it comes to thoughts or feelings of inadequacy, which do you do most? How many of y'all say you stew most? Raise your hand. Okay. All right. That's a healthy amount of stewers. How many say you do, but yet you're proven? You're a prover. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's a healthy amount. And so it's almost split. How many of y'all raise your hand? You're a steward. You just proved it. You're a steward. I knew that was going to happen. Well, either way, whether you're a prover, and I'll just be transparent, I fall more on the doing, to prove, versus the stewing and sitting. If you are, whether you are, stewing or doing, you're still stuck. The doers don't know that they're stuck because they're still moving. But you could be wasting energy and wasting time and wasting resources doing things out of a need to prove to other people versus out of what you really need to be doing with your life. And I don't know, maybe you came in this morning or maybe you came into this series and maybe you don't feel like you're enough. Maybe you don't feel adequate enough, or like you're enough as a mother, or maybe you don't feel like you're enough as a father, or maybe you don't feel like you're enough as a student, or maybe you don't feel like you're enough as a business owner, or maybe you don't feel like you're enough as an employee on your job. And so for some of us, we'll sit on the sideline and we'll miss life because we'll be stewing. And for the others of us, we'll spend our whole time trying to prove to our boss and try to prove to our parents because their voice is still in our head about how good we were, or trying to prove to that teacher who told you could not accomplish. We'll waste our time stuck stewing or doing instead of just being. How many of y'all know when God made humans, you ready? This is another week, but I'm going to give it to you early. You ready? When God made humans, he didn't make human doers, he made human beings. And when you learn how to be, this is going to really be bad English, when you learn how to be instead of do, you really can start enjoying your life. Because if the only time you can enjoy your life is when you're doing, you miss the whole point of being. This whole feeling of not being enough is not new to any of us in the room. It's actually all throughout the Word, all throughout the Scripture. We're going to look at somebody in a moment who had that very same feeling. And then what does God say about when we have that feeling that we're not enough? As we get ready to jump into Exodus 3, if you don't have a sermon outline, if you raise your hand, the ushers are there to serve you this morning. But before we jump into it, I want you to know that for 400 years, kind of like that dance was showing, Israel was in Egyptian slavery. And there came a point where God was getting ready to bring deliverance to them. And let me just say real quick to you, I don't care how long you've been where you are, there comes a place where God releases deliverance in your life. Let me just throw that out there right quick. And so God knew he was going to release deliverance. And so, long story short, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, got an edict out that every Israelite male that is born to have the midwives, to kill them in birth, because he knew that a deliverer was going to rise up. And God providentially keeps Moses' life and Moses winds up growing up as Pharaoh's adopted grandson in the king's court, the king's palace. Because Pharaoh's daughter finds Moses, y'all know, in a basket. And so he was the first basket case, praise God. And so, so if you're a basket case, you're in good company. And so he grows up in the king's house. However, so he's growing up with his mother nursing him. That's a whole different part of the story. But he grows up kind of with two identities. He grows up knowing I'm part of Pharaoh's family, and I'm taken as if I'm an Egyptian, which means it comes with privilege. It comes with the king's approval. It comes with inheritance. It comes with, authority, all those things that come with being part of the king's palace and family. But he also knows that his mother is a Jewish woman, and that he's actually a Jew, and he sees his people, they're in bondage, and they're being treated harshly. And so as he gets older, a situation arises where he sees one of his fellow Israelite brothers being mistreated. And Moses takes it upon himself to intervene and to interject. And when he does, Moses winds up killing the young man. And so when Moses kills the young man, he thinks nobody sees it. He finds out very shortly after that somebody saw it. Word leaks. Moses runs to Midian. He gets out of Egypt. He's in hiding. This is where we're picking up in Exodus chapter 3. Y'all tracking with me this morning? All right, here we go. So God shows up to Moses and says to Moses, you're going to go back to Egypt and you're going to deliver your people. Now, verse 11. But Moses said, now you know when you're starting off with a but. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. You might want to underline that. And he said, this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. He said, I'm going to show you that this is me, because you're going to be back here, but the next time you come here, you're going to come back here with almost 3 million people that look like you. Moses said to God, suppose I go and the Israelites, and I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they asked me, what's his name? What shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. You might want to underline that. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. Underline this too. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses in verse 15, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. The name you shall call me from generation to generation. I'm going to get back to that, I hope, at the end, that the Hebrew name is Yahweh. We'll get back to that prayerfully at the end. So Moses' first response to God, when God says, I'm going to use you to be a deliverer of my people. I'm going to send you, not Aaron, your brother, not Miriam, your sister, not Jethro, your father-in-law. I'm going to send you. Tag, you're going back to Egypt. You're going to go bring my people out of Egypt. And Moses' first response to God is really interesting. He says, who am I that read it again. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Moses says, who am I? Which is, I might add real quick, which is what we're actually looking at in our small groups. Who am I? That's really what we're studying. Define, who am I really? Who am I? That's the first thing I want to say. But Moses, I can imagine in his mind, is considering a few things that never came up in this conversation. Moses is considering the last time he was in Egypt, he had a situation. The last time he was in Egypt, he killed a man. The last time he was in Egypt, he ran as a fugitive. I said, man, oh man, Moses been hitting some of my favorites. I said, he got out of Egypt he hit one of my favorite TV shows, How to Get Away with Murder. And then he became a fugitive. Hit one of my 1990 shows, movies I like, The Fugitive. Moses was a fugitive and a murderer. And it's really interesting because at the point he's really saying to God, hold up. I know where I've been. I know you know where I've been. Who am I that you would want to use me? Who am I that you would call me to go back and do it? I can imagine Moses saying to himself, essentially, I'm not worthy enough. I'm not influential enough. I'm not in the king's courts anymore. I'm not strong enough to go against the greatest nation on the planet. I'm not eloquent enough to speak and to tell him. He tells God later on, I got stammering lips. I stutter. You want me to speak a word? I hate public speaking. I'm not connected enough. I'm not bold enough. At the end of the day, I'm just not enough. And notice God never brings up something that I think we all would bring up. Y'all could act saved if you want to, but let somebody try to be your housekeeper that was a murderer. You're going to want to ask questions. I'm talking to somebody. Let somebody who was a fugitive want to watch your kids. You want to ask some questions. God seems to never bring up this thing that Moses committed murder. Ironically, Moses will be the one later to write the law that says, and thou shalt not kill. God never brings up that Moses is a murderer. God never brings up that Moses is a fugitive. Let me say this because God never has to consult your past about your future. I'm going to say that again. God never. Now your employer might, this one might, your friends might, but God never has to consult your past about your future. So God never brings up where Moses came from. Notice that God never says to Moses, with all Moses' excuses was gone beyond this part of the verse, further into the chapter, God never stops to do what I would have done as a Christian. God never stops to say to Moses, Moses, dude, you're enough. God never said that to Moses. Instead, what does God do? When Moses says, who am I that I should go lead your people out of Egypt? God comes back and shifts the conversation from Moses back to himself. He says in verse 12, I will be with you. You know this because you just underlined it. In verse 14, I am who I am. In the other part of verse 14, I am who I am sent you. Translation, if you were here last week, it's my story. And I'm the main character. Not even your deficiencies become the main character when it's my story. Not even your weakness boasts when it's my story. He says, I'm the main character. So while you're thinking about all that you're not, and for some of us we think about all that we are, God said put both of them aside and recognize who I am. You say, well, Pastor, surely Moses had to be enough. I mean, well, let's look at that. You think so? Because it's interesting. God says, he says, I will be with you. I am who I am. So first he says, I'll be with you. That's God's presence. Then he says, I am who I am. That's God's person. He says, and then tell him that I am who I am sent you. That's God's power. That's God's authority. It's like when you go back, I remember when I tell a story about when I was younger, and I was not afraid of really any woman except for this one crazy lady. And when I was a young man, and she scared the devil out of me, she did, because she was crazy. And when her son took my money, I was just shaking in my boots when she told me, my son would never steal from you. Get out of here. Da, 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 da. However, when I went back to my father and told him, he said, you go back over there and you tell Barbara that I said. I went right back over there. I said, Miss Barbara, my father said, let my 20 go. Something like that. There was nothing else to talk about. There was nothing. She went right in the house, went right on top of the TV, got the $20. The boy knew he stole everything. But anyway, he stole it. I got it back because I wasn't going in my authority. I was going with my Father's authority. Some of you, when you walk out this door today, you're going to stop walking in your authority and start walking in your daddy's authority. When you recognize that he's with you, that you got his presence, you got his person, and you got his power, it changes everything. And it don't even matter about if I have enough or how adequate I am or how inadequate I am. I've got God. And when I have God, I've got all that I need. If Moses' power and Moses' person and Moses' presence were enough, guess what he would not have needed? God's. You see, Moses' mission in life was not to prove that he was enough. I'm going to help some of y'all put your resignation in today. And Moses' mission in life was not to stew in fear and insecurity if I'm enough or why I'm not enough. Moses' mission was to prove, or rather to discover and to demonstrate, when you're not enough, say this with me, when you're not enough, God is. If you get that, you got the message today. When you're not enough, God is. Somebody shout that, when you're not enough, God is. That's why Jesus says, I told you earlier that he broke a curse. And I'm going to tell you right now that God's going to break a curse. If you get this, it'll break a curse off your life. If you get what I'm about to say to you, it'll break a curse off your life and off your children's children. If you get this. Jesus coming out on his first sermon, this is the first thing he says publicly as a message to his disciples and all the multitudes. We call it the Beatitudes. As all these thousands of people gather around, he gives his first sermon, and he starts off by saying something that sounds profoundly ridiculous. Blessed are the poor. I don't even want to hear the rest, because how in the world can anything poor be blessed? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That word poor, I'm going to get back to Moses in a minute, but I need to show you something. That word poor is not like, you know, I'm on Section 8 and I got a vouchers, or ET, whatever you call those cards. That, either one of those either. I ain't got one of those either. It's not that kind of poor. It's not we're Title I school poor. That's high class. This kind of poor is destitute. This poor, there's a Greek word that was used here specifically that's not like a typical Greek word that would have been used. There's a Greek word here that literally means that the person is so poor that he is a beggar, it's describing a beggar who is totally dependent on another to survive. How could that possibly be blessed? How could me having an attitude, a mindset of poor in spirit? Notice he didn't say blessed are the poor. Did you catch that? Let me say that again. He didn't say blessed are the poor. He said blessed are the poor what? In spirit. How are the poor in spirit blessed? Because to be poor in spirit is the opposite of being rich in pride. To be poor in spirit is the opposite of being rich in pride. Remember, God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. So essentially, what God is saying is, when you think that you're not enough, and you feel like you're not sufficient, you're headed for a blessing. When you recognize that you don't have enough, let's start with Calvary. You don't have enough to pay your debt. that no matter how much you go to church, that no matter how long you pray, that no matter how much you give, no matter how often you serve, no matter how much you preach or you sing or you dance or you witness or you go to smoke, no matter what you do, you're so poor you can't afford to pay your debt, that only I have what you need. Oh my God. Only I can pay the debt that was due you. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who recognize they can't do life on their own. You're in a paradoxical kingdom. You got to be poor before you can be rich. You're in a kingdom that says the foolish become wise. You're in a kingdom that says if you lose your life, you find your life. Blessed are the poor in spirit. The attitude on the bottom of your sheet that God blesses is total dependence. Woo, that's a hard one, total dependence. What in the land of the free and the brave and the land that values independence? I am my own man. I am my own woman. I don't need nobody else. It's all about me. God says the attitude I bless is not independence, but the attitude I bless is total dependence. What do I bless them with? Before I tell you that, let me just sort of give you a quick story. We were in New York, probably 2014, I want to say. And it was my wife and all three of my children, and I think all of my siblings, And my mom came with us. And those of you that knew her, you knew that she was on oxygen for the latter part of her, the latter part of her life. And in her later years, it became 24/7. She needed oxygen 24/7. So before we could go anywhere, whether I picked her up from her home, before she could come to church, before she could go anywhere, we had to always look at her oxygen tank to always make sure that there was enough oxygen. And so we got to New York, we went around, we did some sightseeing, we had a blast. We had a really good time. We ended up on that Sunday morning at my brother's church, and I preached because I remember, and they do 3 services. This one starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. Did y'all hear that? I look at them and say, y'all are real saved folk. I'm half saved, y'all are really saved. So by that 3rd service, I was toast, and but I was staying up there for something. I think I was doing a meeting the next day. And different ones had different times that they were coming back to Atlanta, and so Pastor Mona was coming back, and somebody else I can't remember. But anyway, my mother was supposed to travel with her. However, we were at church, and because we were at church, and everybody got so caught up, including her, never stopped to look at how much oxygen she had. So when they got to the airport, I got a call saying, Mom's not going to be able to get on a plane ride. I said, why can't she get on a plane ride? They're like, because she don't have enough oxygen to get from New York to last 2 more hours to get to Atlanta. And Pastor Mona had to be back, which is why she left me. And so she had to leave my mother in the airport so my mother can she had to plug in her electric thing so she can increase the air that was in her oxygen tank so that she could fly. And when I think about her, I think about how that is actually a picture of us. Because all of creation, stay with me on this, all of creation is dependent on something else. No, you don't get this one. All of creation. So in order for the moon to be where it is, it's dependent on the Earth's gravity. In order for the Earth to have gravitational pull, it's dependent on the moon. In order for you to have oxygen, you're dependent on the trees. In order for the trees to have carbon dioxide, it's dependent on you. In order for the birds to have food, it's dependent on the animals. Everything in creation is dependent upon something else in creation to sustain it. Nothing in creation exists independently. Everything in creation exists connected and dependent on something else. And so later on that evening, my sister and her husband were coming back home, and they met my mom at the airport. And when they met her at the airport, she was able to get on the plane. And the reason she was able to get on a plane is because she had plugged in to a source. And see, when she plugged into a source, she had been stuck all day, she was able to fly. And see, some of you have been stuck because every time we don't plug into God, because we think we can do it by ourselves, we find ourselves stuck when we really should be flying. The only way you're going to fly is when you plug in with total dependence, recognizing God, I can't do this, I'm not enough. And when I'm not enough, God is. Tell somebody, say, when you're not enough, God is. Tell somebody, say, when you're not enough, God is. And those who get that, oh, I got to move quick. Those who get that, he says, get a kingdom. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Not everybody, but for theirs. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That means that they don't miss earth. They get heaven on earth. That means that they don't have to they're not just Christians that experience what it really means to live in eternity, but they get to live on earth. For theirs is, not shall be. Some of the other beatitudes are shall be. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. No, this one says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for this is the kingdom. Wherever there's a kingdom, there's a rule. And what God is saying is, he says, when you're poor in spirit and you're under my kingdom rule, I'm the king, I can rule in your favor. Somebody needs God to turn something in their favor. And God says, when you're under the kingdom rule and you recognize that what you can't do, I can rule in your favor. When you're not enough, God is. And this is what he tells them. Just to be clear. He says to Moses, I will be with you. You might want to fill in that God is with you. God is with you. When you feel like you're not enough, God is with you. This week when you go through your challenges and you go through your struggles and you have to face what seems to be so difficult and so hard and you feel like you don't have the muscle to bear up underneath it, God is with you. You need to remind yourself, God is with me. When I recognize or I feel that I'm not enough, God is enough. And how is God enough? God is with me. How is God enough? Secondly, he tells Moses, I has sent you. Not only is God with you, but God is for you. Because you can have a whole lot of folk with you that ain't necessarily for you. So in case you're confused, not only is God with you, but God said, I'm for you. And perhaps even more importantly, it won't sound like it at the beginning, but even more importantly, God is independent of you. He is independent of you. See, while everything in creation, everything in the universe is dependent on something. That's why I don't worship. Let me just real quick, because I know with all this New Age stuff, and it gets mixed up sometimes on social media and Christianity, and people put scriptures and New Age stuff, they don't even know they're doing it. Let me say this to you real quick. We don't worship the universe. We don't worship, if the universe wishes it, the devil is a liar. The universe is a creation. It is not the creator. The universe does not hold or control your destiny. Only God does. The universe is not self-sustaining. It is sustained by the hand of God. Don't give credit to a creation. Give credit to the creator. That's a real easy way to miss earth, is to give credit to the creation. Oh, nice car. You did a wonderful job making yourself. That's the dumbest thing you could ever say in a car. Nice painting. What a wonderful job you did. It was created by something or someone. But God is independent. So while man And everything in creation is dependent on something else, someone else. I mean, we just demonstrating it right now. Every time you breathe in and breathe out, you just prove my point. You need sunlight. Every time you take in sunlight, you prove my point. That's his air you're breathing. God is independent. God is absolute. Well, what do you mean, Pastor, when you say absolute? Absolute literally means utterly independent. In other words, God depended on nothing for his existence. God depended on nothing to be in existence. God depends on nothing to stay in existence. God depends on nothing to be in existence in the future. I am who I am, utterly independent of anything that is. I am absolutely. I am absolute truth. I am absolute beauty. I am absolute reality. I am absolute perfection. I am who I am. You say, well, what's the good news in that? You ready? That when you come together with God, God doesn't need whatever you bring to the table, because you say, I have nothing to give. I can't speak right, God. I'm a murderer. I've ran away. I'm a fugitive. I have nothing to bring to the table. He says, great, because I'm independent. I don't need anything. So if you feel like you ain't got nothing, if you feel like you don't have anything to bring to the table, this ain't a marriage where you say it's 50-50 or sometimes 60-40, and every now and then it's 70-30. God said you just bring 100% of your inadequacies. You bring 100% of what you're not, and you'll get 100% of everything that I absolutely am. I am God, and besides me, there is no other. I am God from day one. I'll be God at day two. At the end of the day, God said, I don't need him. I don't need her. I don't need you. I don't need them. I'm God all by myself. So when you feel like you're not enough, somebody shout, God is. When you feel like you're not strong enough, what? When you feel like you're not smart enough, what? When you feel like you're not eloquent enough, what? When you feel like you're not spiritual enough, what? When you feel like you're not bright enough, what? God is. The person who really gets that, your life will change. I said the person who gets that, your life will change. He ends the conversation with Moses. That phrase, I am who I am, is actually the finality in the conversation. So you've heard other ones like this. You ever go to your parent and they like, you ask them, this was me, I had to ask. No, the first time wasn't enough. Persistent. And finally you get that I said no. How many of y'all know that's the final no? Y'all know what I'm talking about? We read that even with Pilate, with Jesus, he says, there's another expression in Scripture that says there's a finality. So he says, I have written what I have written. No more debate. Nothing else needs to be said about it. That expression where God says, I am who I am, was a clause that's considered with finality. In other words, the conversation is over. And you need to get that in your spirit about this debate about if you're enough or not. The conversation is over, because where I'm not enough, God is. There's nothing else to argue with. There's nothing else to muddle over. There's nothing else to reflect on. There's nothing else to go back around in circles about, am I enough? Should I do it? I got to prove to him. You ain't got to do nothing, because as long as you know that God is enough, that's all you need. He said his name is Yahweh. He said, I am the Lord. I'm God all by myself. And I'm out of time. Would you stand on your feet with me this morning? Come on, y'all. Come on, come on. Y'all was with me in the beginning. Y'all was with, all right. Some people, expression says it took, when God called Moses at the burning bush and spoke to him, Moses was 80 years old. I wondered why Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness, why it took God 40 years to finally call him into his life's purpose. Maybe God needed Moses. Well, let me say this. Maybe Moses initially was too full of himself. Maybe God waited for Moses to become poor in spirit. It has been said that Moses, who lived to be 120, spent the first 40 years in the palace thinking he was somebody. Spent the next 40 years on the backside of a desert wilderness thinking he was nobody. And spent the last 40 years, the part that you know the most about, realizing what God could do through anybody who realizes that they're nobody without him. I need for you to put your resignation in. Get rid of your resume, proving what you can do and who you are, and showing the world that I can do this and I got it, I'm strong enough, or I'm my own man, or I'm my own woman, I got this going on. I need you to put your resignation in. Because when you stand before an almighty, all-sufficient, and independent, absolute God, he doesn't need whatever you bring. He just wants you. Are you hearing what I'm saying to you this morning? And when you get that, you move to the richness of God. Because it's no longer me leaning on my strength or my inability or my insufficiency. It's me receiving everything that God has for me and me being able to walk in that on earth. How many want that this morning? Run down here real quick if you're really serious. Come on, y'all, bring it. If you ain't serious, stay there. But if you raise your hand, it's all about you, God. It's all about you. It's not about my insufficiency, God. It's not about us not being enough, God. Everything that we're not,